So, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Nicole Myths, Astrology, and Tarot. I was guided to do a person 1, person 2 reading for you today. All right, so, take it in divine time whenever it crosses your path, whenever you find it, whenever you're guided to it. Know that this message was meant to reach you and take it however it resonates. Okay. The decks I used today, I used my Chakra Wisdom Tarot for person 1, and I used my Botticelli Golden Tarot for person 2. I also used my new descriptor deck to get an energetic read on both individuals. And then I pulled from Brian Froud's The Fairy Oracle for whatever you had to take away understanding this connection. Okay, so, maybe it's guidance, maybe it's closure, whatever it is meant to be for you. Okay, so person 1. We have the Strength card on the top of the deck and Temperance was on the bottom. Came out with truthful, healthy, and unjust or radical extremes in the reverse. It also came out with the 9 of Coins, clarified by the 8 of Cups, and the 6 of Wands, clarified by the 8 of Swords. Now, person number 1, I definitely feel as if this person was or is a catalyzing agent, a change agent with Temperance on the bottom. I think that is the underlying energy. It's very strong Sagittarian and Leo energy here with these two top and bottom cards. And you could see all the fiery colors, right? They got a lot of fiery oranges and reds and yellows. So you may resonate as a fire sign for person number 1, or have very strong or significant fire placements in your chart, potentially very strong Leo or Sagittarian energy, okay? This person I got this energy that they are very humbly without ego, okay? I feel like this person is very humble and without ego. This person, I feel like they do not allow pride to be a factor in their forward. Okay. It's kind of what I'm picking up on. They do not let their pride be a factor in their forward. If they have to move forward, they have to move forward. And I feel that's what they've done, because the 9 of Coins, the way they see themselves is very independent, right? The top card here is looking in a mirror. It's filled with abundance, right? It's filled with lots of resources. It's filled with beautiful blooming energy. And this is how they see themselves, right? They see themselves reflected in the outer experience. The outer is reflecting from the inner. And they have moved forward. 8 of Cups clarifying that energy. They have moved forward. In fact, they have set their past on fire. All right, there is a huge plume of smoke in the background. They have let their past go completely. They've moved forward to new land, so to speak. They've completely let the past go. They've purged their energy of it. Okay. 6 of Wands. They've claimed a victory for themselves. They feel victorious. They feel good about the direction they're headed. Again, looking forward. Clarified by the 8 of Swords. This specific 8 of Swords, they no longer resonate with whoever was in their divine mirror, who was trapped, who is mentally trapped, who is constantly feeling as if they were in a mental prison. I feel like they've left that mirror, that reality, that mirror behind, because there's 2 mirrors on the card, and they definitely see themselves as the 9 of Coins. And I think they've walked away with that 6 of Wands completely from what was a mirror they no longer resonated to. So it's a dynamic, most likely with person number 2, that they don't resonate to it anymore. It is no longer in their reality. All right, person number 1 definitely walked away from person number 2, possibly because person number 2, the way that person number 1 perceived them, person number 1 perceived person number 2 as unjust or unfair, and a person of radical extremes, which they would not tolerate, right? So person number 1 definitely claimed independence from person number 2. They were nothing but truthful or are nothing but truthful and at a healthy energetic state within themselves. All right, this is someone who has healthy throat chakra energy, healthy root chakra energy, and will not accept blocked crown chakra energy. Okay, because the reverse side of the unjust radical extremes is crown chakra energy, and it's fairness in reverse. So they will not accept that which is not fair or balanced, and if they are without ego and pride, they cannot resonate with someone who is highly egoic or prideful, right? Someone who is blocked from receiving divine guidance, right? That they would be so caught up in the mind, that 8 of Swords, they would be so caught up in the mind and their own perceptions of things, feeling trapped in whatever pain is present, that they're not receiving messages intuitively, which if we move over to person number 2, they had the 7 of Pentacles on bottom with the King of Coins, the King of Pentacles on top. They had, as the descriptor energy, clairsentient in reverse, genuine in reverse, expressive and self-forgiving in reverse. Okay, so this person has upper chakra blocks or resistance, okay, from the throat chakra, the third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. This person may have a very difficult time forgiving themselves for things that they had done in the past, either with person number 1, to person number 1, or prior to person number 1, right? This person has major issues forgiving themselves. It is a crown chakra block, which obviously person number 1 drew a line with, right? Because that was causing the unjust or radical extremes. So this person was not self-forgiving. They probably made poor investments in others and hasn't let it go. And maybe they feel owed, or they took too much from person number 1 and they have too much pride to reconcile it. Okay, this person not being genuine could be wearing a facade, okay, a mask that's different for everyone. All right, different than what's really going on inside. They may be very afraid to let people see what energetic state they're actually in, and they're blocking out their clairsentient ability, which is their ability to empathically pick up on psychic cues beyond their 5 senses, right? That they would be able to tune into their own feelings and the intentions of others. Because they block this energy, may be a terrible judge of character. Okay, they may invest, like I said, in the wrong people and not invest in the right people. So if person number 1 was truly healthy for person number 2, person number 2 wouldn't have picked up on that cue. They might have been putting on a facade to person number one that, they cared or knew how much person number one cared, but it's almost like they didn't. All right. Now, person number one, maybe having a really hard time seeing what is worth it. Okay. They may be having a hard time seeing what's worth it. We have the Eight of Cups clarified by the Three of Swords and the Ace of Swords clarified by the Queen of Pentacles. On their side, this person cannot move on. Okay, now that person number one has completely left the picture, and I do feel like person number one doesn't resonate with person number two at all. They don't resonate with that mirror anymore. They don't resonate with that situation anymore. They don't resonate with that energy. I feel like person number one is completely gone and detached from any situation with person number two. They've moved forward and they no longer resonate with that mirror. They're in a happier, better energy place, right? Person number two, Eight of Cups in the reverse, clarified by the Three of Swords. They absolutely can't move on from the loss and the pain of losing person number one. Okay. Person number two's inability to heal their throat chakra, their way of communicating, their ability to recognize their truth and be vulnerable with their truth and the expressing of their truth, their inability to see the positives and see the long-term, be focused on the long-term goals. I think this person got very caught up with worst case scenarios in the third eye, and were taking actions based off what they felt was truth in their mind's eye, when really I feel like this was shadows getting in the way, like past shadows. They were seeing worst case scenarios, and they made choices potentially based on those things, which they could not forgive themselves for, because I do feel like person number one definitely has this like temperance angel quality to them, right? Person number two is more torn up about it emotionally than they probably care to admit. They do see themselves as the King of Pentacles, and they want their Queen of Pentacles. They want their equal. They want their match. Now, I do feel, especially because she had the Croak as the connecting card, I'm going to get to that in a second, that person number two does have another young energy in the reality with them. Could be potentially like a maiden type energy, a younger maiden, and I do feel as if this maiden here is kind of trying to pick up person number two. I think they're doing their best to pick up person number two. I think person number two is still really fucking down and out and praying for person number one, praying to God, praying for answers, praying for direction. The problem is they block their own guidance, right? They don't actually want to hear the advice that the divine would give them, and so they're hearing nothing, right? They have to be open to receive the advice that the divine would give them, their intuition would give them, and heed it, right? And take it. If the divine tells them what to do and they're like, no, I can't do that, well, that's why they're not getting an answer, because it's quote unquote not getting an answer. They are getting an answer. They're just not getting the answer they want, right? They're not getting the answer they want. And so they have this maiden energy coming through, who's on the bottom of the Seven of Pentacles on the bottom of the deck, and on the Three of Swords. This person, I can't help but feel that there's potential pregnancy involved or children that will be involved or are involved with this maiden, okay? Because in both cards, she definitely looks very pregnant, and in the Three of Swords, she is pulling the masculine energy on the card around by their hair, and they're completely down and out. Like the Three of Swords, that energy is completely down and out. And I do feel like the maiden energy is trying to pick up the pieces, but they are not the queen to the king, right? I definitely feel like they are not person number one, okay? They are not person number one. I don't think that whoever person number two is over person number one. So, to be completely honest, it gives me this feeling of when, if you think about the movie The Beauty and the Beast, it reminds me of the very beginning when the old woman knocked on the castle door and the prince answered and she offered him a rose. And he laughed at her and mocked her, right? And treated her like crap, like she's just some ugly nobody, you know? Because that, in all honesty, was his perception of her. It wasn't who she really was, but it was his perception of her, that she was an ugly nobody, right? That her energy was just a nobody, and she's offering me a simple rose. Like, come on. And yet she transformed into the Enchantress. Like, that's who she really was. She was a powerful, magical enchantress, and she was beautiful, and that's who she really was. He didn't see her for who she really was. And yet there's this lesson, right? There's this lesson, and she leaves the rose with him. The lessons, right? She leaves the rose with him and disappears. She never returns to the prince's life, and he becomes the beast. And he goes through this dark night of how could anybody ever love a beast? And recognizing that his energy, the perception of her was really his energy within, that he was an ugly beast, perceiving her to be such a thing, right? That he projected his own negative energy onto someone who was not what he perceived. He perceived himself in the Enchantress when really the Enchantress could never be that, right? So the beast ends up going through this journey and has the rose as a reminder, right? As a reminder. And then this maiden, Belle, comes into the picture, right? And is reteaching the beast what the Enchantress was trying to teach him all along, right? That he does have the potential to be very beautiful and very grateful and very loving and receiving of love, that he deserves the receiving of Belle's love, you know, in the end of the story, right? So it's kind of what it reminds me of. It's almost like person number two is the prince who met the Enchantress, which is person number one, and is now on their own mission, and the Enchantress has gone, right? Understanding who these two are, right? You know which one is you. When catching this in Divine Time, you understand which one is you already, whether you're person number one or person number two. So this is what you can take away from the connecting energy. Okay, She of the Cruac. She of the Cruac indicated a necessary time of nurturing and development. It was where someone needed to be open to the overflowing grace that She of the Cruac was. She of the Cruac may also indicate a need to allow her nurturing grace to flow through us to others in the form of unconditional love and giving and spiritual healing. She tells us of the need for unconditional receiving, of making the best of what we are offered. And she also reminds us that unbounded love and grace is ours, just waiting to be accepted. Okay, now this card originally flew out in the reverse, so I do feel as if person number 1 was she of the Cruac. And it's crazy because if you look at she of the Cruac, the actual shapes on the card, and the 6 of Wands from person number 1, look at this. Look at the way the shapes mirror with her arms up and even her dress. Like, person number 1, person number 1 is she of the Cruac, okay? Person number 1 is she of the Cruac. So from there, okay, I'll get back to the meaning of the card, but person number 1 is definitely she of the Cruac. Okay, now she of the Cruac is I'll actually read a little bit from you for the book. She of the Cruac is the receptive principle, the nurturing, right? The fertility or the ability to birth things, right, into the reality through this nurturance, right? This ability to receive. She is the great goddess, the many-named mother of all, and all goddesses are attributes or aspects of her. Her cup, the Cruac, overflows with bounty for all. She is the yin energy of the universe, nurturing, compassionate, and wise. She gives form and brings into manifestation the will and life force of he, the fiery sword. His is the intention, the action, and hers is the manifest reality. In a sense, she is the Cruac holding all the worlds within her being, right? So she was, in a sense, person number 1 was, in a sense, the unbounded, unconditionally loving feminine energy, the goddess of goddesses energy, and was seeking to bring out that energy from person number 2 so that they could step into the counterpart role of he, the fiery sword, who is essentially the great manifester, right? When they're backed with the receiving energy of she, the Cruac, they can manifest anything because she has this uncanny ability to receive and nurture it into form, right? She's the divine receiving yin energy. And so there was this patience with the temperance card that person number 1 had, because temperance is patience. There was a lot of patience that person number 1 was having, and a lot of strength that they were bringing forward in order to help raise the vibration of person number 2. Ultimately, whether we rise or fall or stagnate is a choice of the individual, right? It's our healing and it's our choice. So, I think that person number 1 allowed person number 2 plenty of time and ability and space and nurturance to rise to the he of the fiery sword. I mean, because even if you see the Ace of Swords in person number 2's energy, it's sticking in the trunk, but it's not on fire. You know what I mean? Like, person number 2 never ended up becoming he of the fiery sword, which ultimately concludes the dynamic between the two, right? If there was a potential path forward between person number one and person number two, I do believe that that path has passed. I think that person number one was at the divine crossroads and took a certain path based off the inability for person number two to rise with their energy. Person number one wanted a better mirror, right? They didn't want to be trapped in this stuck, painful mental space that they felt was unjust with person number two. And so I think that they took a path forward away from this energy, and I think wholeheartedly they have truly left it behind, left it to the divine to work with person number two from here on out, okay? And because of that, I think the ultimate lesson really is for person number two. I think they still have to focus on their upper tier, their chakras, right? Throat chakra, third eye chakra, crown chakra, really unblocking those things. If you resonated to being person number two with this message in divine time, you can YouTube different hertz, HZ. You can Google different hertz, different meditations and sounds that you can listen to even while you're sleeping to help you with these chakras. There's certain exercises that you can do as well. You could focus on positive self-speech in the mirror. You could focus on positive visualizations, right? Looking towards the future at things that are positive instead of falling into worst case scenarios. I think you have to work on definitely not letting possibly outside interference sway you away from your own intuitive knowing about people. I think that there was a lot of resistance to seeing the beauty in person number one. I think there was a disbelief, right? I think there was a serious disbelief. If your own genuine energy is blocked, then you may have perceived person number one as wearing a mask because that's what you do, but person number one wasn't wearing a mask. You were perceiving person number one that way because you wear a mask. And so you assumed person number one did. You couldn't connect with person number one's intentions, motivations, and that's because you weren't in touch with your own intention or motivation, your own vision for the future. You lost touch with it, and so you assumed person number one did as well. Right? You assumed person number one lost sight of the long-term goals. Maybe you assumed person number one didn't know how you felt or didn't know what you wanted when really they did, and you didn't know what you wanted. Right? Maybe you thought person number one could not forgive you for certain things when the reality is you couldn't forgive you for certain things. And so now moving forward, especially because I do feel like there's definitely another energy in the reality of person number two, this is going to be a new chapter of opportunity for you to rise, okay? Because the divine never gives up on anybody. We give up on ourselves sometimes, but the divine never gives up on anyone. So if one opportunity, if one path has passed, okay, person number one went down one way and person number two has gone down another, I do believe that this is a door that is opening for person number two to truly rise to the occasion and learn from person number one, so that person number two can actually better emulate the beautiful qualities of person number one, right? That they would become more truthful with themselves and others, that they would become more healthy in a dynamic, right? Energetically healthy to be around, and that they would release unfair or radically extreme behavior, right? That person number 2 would be able to forgive the self for not seeing what they coulda, shoulda, woulda saw with person 1, that they would be able to become more genuine, that they would be able to see people for who they are as new individuals and not lump them into past people, right? Because I do feel like person number 1 was someone person number 2 has never encountered before. I don't think person number 2 ever met someone like person number 1 ever. And maybe that was a problem, because person number 2, it wasn't a problem that they met someone they had never met before as far as personality type or whatever. The problem is they grouped person number 1 into a crowd of past memories of people they had already met and dealt with and were potentially hurt by. Right? They assumed person number 1 was the same as everybody else they had ever met, when really person number 1 was genuinely different. And person number 2 didn't see that. They were essentially blinded in their mind, right? Because if you look at the mirror in the 8 of Swords as clarifying person number 1, like they truly walked away from the mirror. And the mirror that they were looking at with person number 2 was someone who was trapped in their own mind and blind. They're blindfolded. They're blind. They could not see who person number 1 truly was to them. They couldn't see it because they had never seen or witnessed it before. And so I really do feel like person number 2, I feel like person number 2 did miss a wonderful opportunity to grow with person number 1, but that's okay because, there's no mistakes. Everything is divine. That period of nurturance, right? That period of nurturance and development was necessary. She of the Kruak needed to overflow unconditional love and giving and spiritual healing to person number 2. Because person number 2 needed to be reminded of unbounded love and that grace is ours and that it's just waiting to be accepted, right, as a part of the self. So person number 1 ended up being a teacher of love for person number 2. Person number 1 may have, whether person number 2 realizes it yet or not, showed them the way out of their pain, out of their overthinking, right? It's not all about reading every cue and dissecting people and trying to understand motives and looking back at every action and every word. Sometimes it's just a matter of trusting your gut, trusting your heart about what you sense in people. Because if person number 2 ever thought person number 1 would genuinely or maliciously hurt them or use them, if they got really real with their heart-to-hearts and looked back at person number 1, I think they'd beat their head against the wall. Like, how could I ever think that about person number 1? Right? Person number 1 is truthful. Person number 1's energy was healthy. Person number 1's energy was fair. And I feel like it's very unfortunate that person number 2 can't let it go with the 8 of Cups in the reverse. They can't move on. I really do feel like they're heartbroken and they're praying for a redo. And they will get their redo, just not with person number 1. Okay. They're going to get their redo, but they're not going to get with person number 1. And there may be children or pregnancy involved in order to help them move forward. Okay, I would not be surprised, because I feel like the truth is the person number 2 wants the queen to their king type energy. And they're going to have to find it in this new energy, right? They're going to have to find it in this new person. They're going to have to take the lessons they learned from person number 1 and apply it to their new situation, their new path unfolding, right? In order to heal. And I think that person number 1's path forward is very bright, very beautiful, very abundant. I think that they made the right choice to let go of the path with person number 2, so that they didn't end up in a very painful mirror that was truly unfair for them to stay in. That was not justice, right? Person number 1, for as truthful and honest and healthy as they were, for how beautiful their energy was, did not deserve to continue to stagnate and or suffer with person number 2. Okay, person number 2 has some serious healing. Okay, they have some serious healing. Definite chakra work to do. They need to find themselves, their best self. I'm going to hold space and love and put out some support for person number 2. And if you catch this reading in divine time, I would ask and welcome that you do that. That you do the same if you don't mind. Just hold space for whoever person number 2 is, whether you have this person number 2 in your experience or not. Someone does. Many of us do, right? Because this is a collective energy. So, space held, love and support sent. And if you are, in fact, person number 1, look forward to the future, because I do not doubt you are still manifesting your He of the Fiery Sword, right? That is essentially what you're going to receive, because that's what you were working on manifesting from the gate with person number 2. And if that's what you're manifesting to receive and didn't receive it from person number 2, it doesn't mean you're not receiving it at all. So look forward to the receiving of your actual counterpart, right? Your actual energetic counterpart, someone who's going to meet you on your level, right? Someone who's going to actually meet you on your level. So I hope this gave you some great insight. And I will see you next time. Much love to you guys always. Drop a like if you haven't already. Take care.